Thank you. And great to see that we have a number of people logging on. So welcome to the Institute on Ecosystems Rough Cut Seminar Series for another year. And so this fall, we have a pretty full lineup so far. I think we're only have a couple slots to fill yet later in the semester, but we're anxious to continue the tradition here and hope that people will log in. It's electronic for the first time. We won't have any of the live parts, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it goes. So without any further ado, Madison will be introducing our participants each week and the people that will be presenting. And I'm we've got a great lineup of different topics. It's going to be a really interesting semester. So go ahead, Madison. It's all you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. This is very exciting to see this many people jumping on, especially this is our first go at an all virtual seminar, as Bruce said. So first things first, as people are jumping on, just a reminder to please mute your microphones, and I also can do that as well, but just want to limit any kind of noise interference with the presentation today. And then second, before I introduce Arica and her students, just as for the question and answer portion, again, to kind of make this run as efficiently and smoothly as possible, ask that if you do have a question, to please type that into the chat function on WebEx. And you will see that down if you scroll or kind of like hover over the main WebEx page. There's like a little chat bubble, and you should just be able to enter them into there, and you can do that throughout the presentation. And then when it's over, Arica and I will be able to see those questions and can move through them and respond as well, students as well. So I am very excited today for our first seminar of the fall semester to have Dr. Arica Crootof and her students presenting. So Arica is an assistant professor of environmental sustainability at the University of Montana Western in Dillon. And her students are from her Human Dimensions of Global Change course. And they have been researching recreational use and public perceptions of water quality and contamination of the Warm Springs ponds in the Upper Clark Fork watershed. So I'll leave it at that little brief introduction so that they can really get into the meat of what they've been doing. Again, just super excited to have students presenting. It's always just, a joy, and students listening out there are super excited about having you speak. And I would just say too, before a student presents, if you just want to introduce yourself and your name, and we can go from there. So yeah, Arica, we can go ahead and get started.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madison, and thank you, Bruce, and thank you all for being here today for our presentation. Designing collaborative research, understanding public perceptions of the Warm Springs ponds to inform reclamation needs. So as Madison said, I'm Arica Crootof. I teach environmental sustainability here at Montana Western. And but my background interests and research interests are really around water and energy management. So that's kind of the focus of our project today. I know we're joining from all over, but I wanted to just take a minute to acknowledge that the Warm Springs ponds and Upper Clark Fork River watershed, which is part of our study site, are on the homelands of the Salish and Kootenai tribes, who have stewarded this land for generations. As you'll see in our talk today, since these people were removed from the land, the landscape has been drastically altered. The slides, oh, there we go. And these alterations of the landscape connect to our research project, but also our class, which is Human Dimensions of Global Change, where we're looking at the interactions of human and natural processes in a changing world. So students today who will be presenting come from different degree majors, including environmental sustainability, as well as ecology and wildlife. This research project is part of a much larger research project that I have with seed funding from the CRUISE grant, and it's funded by Montana NSF EPSCoR. with a lot of partners. And so this project is promoting community resilience through understanding social perceptions of water quality, contamination in the Upper Clark Fork River watershed. Mouthful. So today you're going to really be hearing from the students about all the work they've been doing. And this research kind of started in the spring. Students were trained in research design. We're now working on training in data collection and methods. And so they're going to be sharing all of that work with looking ahead to where we're going. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Silas Troy, who's going to give a little brief history and background about Silver Bow Creek and the Butte Area Superfund.
I'll take this thing off here. All right, so starting off, I'm going to talk about the Salish and the Kootenai people. So they historically inhabited most of western Montana, and the Silver Bow and the Clark Fork rivers were very important to these people because in the fall there was large numbers of bull trout that would migrate up the stream to spawn because they're fall spawners, and they used to trap these bull trout in fish traps and also shoot them with bows. So quite a bit of cultural significance within these watersheds with indigenous people. The richest hill on earth. So Butte has an early history of mining and contamination. Butte began colonial colonization in the 1860s for mostly prospectors looking for gold and silver. Copper mining didn't really start until 1882 when the demand for copper dramatically increased with the electrification of America. This made Butte one of the biggest cities between Minneapolis and San Francisco. So during this time, Butte was a pretty booming metropolis, an industrial city. So that with that came a lot of waste. So legacy of wealth and waste. Like all mining operations, the copper began to run out, and the waste ended up outlasting the wealth for the city of Butte. There is still currently an active mine in Butte, and there's also obviously a lot of heavy metal contamination and contaminated sediment left in the Butte area. All right, environmental quality and the 3 R's. So this is just kind of briefly going over a difference between reclamation, remediation, and restoration. So the top line would be right here would be your natural baseline. So that's like a native unaltered habitat. Bottom is reclamation. So that's just the very basic reclamation you can do. And this line below reclamation is just the, if you didn't do anything to this contaminated area, the natural process would slowly start to take over. So here's reclamation, then remediation is just a step above that. And restoration is even further, where restoration, you're trying to get it to the area as natural and native looking and just back to its natural habitat, basically, is what you want to do in a restoration project. So Superfund and restoration efforts. So in 1980, Congress established CERCLA, which stands for Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act. Because that's such a mouthful, we simply refer to it as Superfund. There are currently 13 Superfund sites in Montana, and in this picture is the old Middletown site, Superfund. All right. So why do we care? Well, we want to have public input and engagement looking ahead, and that means using the public's input to guide restoration efforts and create community involvement and interest in the Warm Springs Ponds area. So that's the Warm Spring Ponds area is our main focus for this project. All right, so here's just a graph or an image of the 3 Superfund complexes in our area here. So this is Butte here, Anaconda, and Missoula. So this is the Clark Fork. And this is all under a super fund to be cleaned up from the 1908 flood that really basically pushed a whole bunch of contaminated sediments all through Silverbow Creek and through this Clark Fork watershed, depositing it all through the floodplains there. So here's the Warm Springs Pond, and that's full of contaminated material that is the site of a future project or projects, and kind of what we're focusing on. But yeah, Silverbow Creek has been restored and is currently, I think, maybe still being restored a little bit, but yeah, it's been showing positive impacts of restoration efforts in that area. All right, and that's just basically kind of just a little geographic overview of the area of the Superfund there. And with that, I'm going to pass it on off to Arica.
Thanks, Silas. I have this transition system between mess and no mess. So what are the Warm Springs Ponds? So the Warm Springs Ponds were built by the Anaconda Company between 1911 and 1959, and they're currently maintained and operated by Atlantic Richfield. They cover about 2,500 acres or about 4 square miles, so it's quite a large area. And I'm guessing it would be nice to see a show of hands. I can't see that. But how many people have been to the Warm Springs Ponds? But if you haven't been, I encourage you to stop by. But my guess is you have driven by them because they are right along I-90 when you're heading west out of Butte, kind of just past Anaconda. So you've probably seen them there on the north side. And if you haven't, then next time, check it out. So they are settling ponds that were designed to help reduce metal contamination that was in Silverbow Creek before it entered the Clark Fork River. So trying to settle out copper, arsenic, cadmium, lead, and zinc. Because these ponds have been working as settling ponds for the last 100+ years, there's a lot of contaminated waste here. So it's estimated that they hold 19 million cubic yards of contaminated sediment, which is more than 6 times the amount of sediment that was removed from behind Milltown Dam. And it could fill nearly 6,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So we have all this contamination, and yet these ponds are also serve as a really important recreation and wildlife area. So it is locally known for the trophy-sized trout that reside in these ponds. You can fish there, but you can't eat the fish. And they do provide critical habitat for wildlife, and especially migratory birds. So in looking forward and looking at reclamation plans, we need to really understand how are these ponds used, who are using these ponds, and what we want that to look like in the future, trying to balance the needs, the ecological needs, as well as the public's interest and the contamination issues. And to do this work, to find those interesting questions and to learn what questions we should be asking, I reached out to the Clark Fork Coalition early on, before this research project was funded, to learn what are the interesting questions, what is the data you need to know, what's going to be useful, and I wanted to really make sure I was collecting data and designing a project that could be used to inform reclamation needs. Alex at the Clark Fork Coalition put me in contact with US EPA, Natural Resource Damage Program, as well as Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. And then I've also been working with Dr. Libby Metcalf at the University of Montana to really kind of develop this research and move it forward. So the research questions we came up with and that we're really focusing on are who are these users? How are these ponds being used? Where are people coming from? What are they doing? And what does this look like? How does this usage change throughout the day, throughout the year? We're also trying to understand and really get at the breadth of perspectives that exist around water quality and contamination of the ponds. And how do the people want to be using the ponds, or what could they see moving forward as part of this reclamation? So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Matthew Cohen, who's going to be talking about designing collaborative research.
How's it going, guys? My name's Matt Cowan. I'm here at the University of Montana Western. Today I'm going to be going through and be sharing with you our collaborative research and the designs that we are using to continue our research. Each of these papers has helped us create the basic layout of how we should work on this project. They have shown us the right way to include not only the scientists, but the common and public stakeholders who may or may not know anything about our project. So for our project, we are reaching out and collaborating with stakeholders and are working closely with state and federal agencies such as the EPA and Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. We are working with nonprofits such as the Clark Fork Coalition and reaching out to the local community and people who use the Warm Springs ponds. Throughout our project, we are working on having a back and forth exchange with these groups, from developing our research questions to developing our survey questions so we can learn from each other. In this article written by Petz in 2007, it basically says that we, as the gatekeepers of science, must be able to teach in an interpretive form that the common public can relate to and prioritize key points of research while also providing enough information that experts will also take away key information. There's value in deliberation and discussion between experts and laypersons to regard environmental decision-making by increasing knowledge of issues and solutions to those issues, and instilling in community members a sense of ownership and pride in their local ecosystems and the efforts to preserve and restore them. In this quote written by Metcalf et al. In 2015, it says that trust is an important element in the success of restoration projects. There are many challenges in building trust, given the many factors in human-environment interactions, but it is very important in the success of restoration projects. In this paper, we also found that it was important to build trust with the public early on in the restoration process. This article is also important to our study because it focuses on the restoration in the Clark Fork River. Allowing the public to voice their opinions and concerns about the Warm Springs Ponds restoration will give them a sense of recognition, which can help build trust. As you'll see in the next section, we work to learn from the public how they use the ponds and how they view the ponds. Trust is not easily gained, therefore allowing the public to give their opinions shows that their opinions are highly valued in this process. So the definition of co-production of knowledge here is defined as a process of combination knowledge from many different resources and perspectives to create a shared understanding and finish line to work towards for environmental management. This occurs from the direct connection and collaboration between researchers and practitioners. Co-production of knowledge can help understanding by the researchers, stakeholders, and the public. It also produces more fruitful outcomes for both stakeholders and the public in our research. We aim to work with stakeholders to support shared understanding and informed management options for the Warm Springs ponds. This final figure helps with thinking about how we will build our relationships with stakeholders to help support shared learning and creating new knowledge. The first part of this is setting up the component. By doing this, we begin to build our research plan. This stage helps to create a better understanding with the research team. Through this collaboration, we can create a shared vision. Our next step is the development and the design. This component is incorporating different values, interests, and ideas, as well as having all parties prioritize what needs to be done, but also prioritizes what the stakeholders and agencies want to know from the public and others. We are currently in this stage, seeking feedback on our questions to help us have a successful project outcome. The last section of this is the implementation. The implementation component is where most of the work itself is done. With this, you must have engagement, communication, and integration of local knowledge between the public and agencies in order to create a foundation for the co-produced knowledge. It is important to collaborate with the most influential people in the community, which helps to express the public's concerns. All in all, this section is based on communication and flexibility of how the project is implemented. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Pinar.
How's it going? My name is Kumar, and today I'm going to be talking about how we set up the design and the different methods we went about to create this research project. Starting off, we went with our survey, and the three main parts to get information from everyone will be the questionnaire, which is for like the general public, for them to take. We hope to get like about 300 of these. And then another group will be doing our semi-structured interviews, with different stakeholders and agencies and nonprofits. And third off, our participant observations. All of the students in our class will be going to the warm springs ponds to view how people are using them and where they're from, things like that. So with our questionnaire, due to COVID and all these things, we moved it online instead of in person talking to people. And two of our links is one for the survey, and another one is our QR code, which will be on the posters located at the ponds, where people who are there can scan it on their phone, take it while they're fishing, or if their hunting's not going too well, they can do that. And this is designed to get a lot of data points all at once so that we can use that later on to move forward with restoration or reclamation and know what the public knows about the ponds or what their questions are moving forward. Here is just an example of the first 4 questions that we have. And we designed these using 15 different papers in the spring that said like how to create non-bias, how to ask questions that won't lead to an answer you're probably gonna give either way. And we also reached out to Ali Archer from the US EPA and Alex Leone from the Clark Fork Correlation to see if they had any other input on these questions, what they would add, if there's stuff we're missing, or if they just in general liked it. Another example is this big table we have on there that will give time of year that they're doing what activities they're choosing to do, and again, giving multiple data points on how they use it so we can move forward. Another tactic we used was an open-ended question, which leaves to give a little more detailed information on how they use the ponds and allows them to also ask us questions about what we're doing if they don't know, anything they're concerned about that we didn't hit on, or other things like that, and just more detail going into this so that we can know what the public wants and how they want to go about it. So going forward in the presentation, I'll pass it on to Tori, who will talk about our semi-structured interviews and our participant observations.
Okay, hi everyone. My name's Tori, and I'm going to talk about our semi-structured interviews. So instead of just doing random sampling, we are going to do targeted sampling, where we talk to specific groups of people based on their background knowledge of the Warm Springs ponds. And we will also use snowball sampling, which means that we are going to see what we should be talking about or what we should be doing more efficiently. Our interviews will be conducted over the phone or via Zoom due to COVID, and we plan on sending out our emails to schedule interviews by the end of this week. And then next week, the week of September 7th, we are going to start conducting our interviews. And for each interview, we will have 2 students. So we plan on one student taking really good notes and the other student asking all the questions, so that way we can record everything and get all of our questions answered. Interviews will have some set questions, but mostly it will be open conversation. We will be contacting agencies, local government, community groups, and nonprofits. So Trout Unlimited, Fish Wildlife Parks, Arica, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Ducks Unlimited, Anaconda Sportsman's Club, just for some examples. And we hope to get about 20 individuals interviewed. And these interviews will allow us to just dig deeper into the perceptions on the pond and what the future will look like for the ponds too. And we really value what all these organizations have to say about the ponds. So for participant observations, a participant observation is a non-biased technique that observes a group of people while partaking in their activities. And like Kennard mentioned, we have done extended research on how to avoid biases and how to keep neutral thoughts when it comes to collecting information through our observations. We will be using this technique for our study by observing what people are doing at the Warm Springs ponds. So we will have pairs of students traveling out to the Warm Springs ponds on the weekends and the weekdays to take note of what the public is doing there. And we plan on walking the trails, fishing, and even just sitting down in reading so that we can blend in with others and make it not so obvious that we are trying to watch people and take note of their activities. And as a class, we have come to an agreement that it would be okay to have small conversations with the users of the ponds. For example, we will be taking notes on how many people are at the ponds, what time of day is it, what is the most common time for people to come to the ponds every day, what's the weather like, where are people from, looking at their license plates, are they Montana residents, are they just passing through? And we think it would be a good idea to look at the types of wildlife there that attract all these people. And another important part is what areas of the ponds are getting used the most. And overall, this will be about 150 hours of student work. And by understanding who uses the ponds and what they value doing at these ponds, it can help us to build a future where they're happy with the ponds and all the restoration work done. But this does not give us a complete picture, but this will give us extra data that maybe our semi-structured interviews and our questionnaire wouldn't originally provide. And then looking at the next steps, in the spring, we did research development and we trained students in research design. We currently are going through training students in data collection. And then, like I said, next week, we will be participating in data collection through our interviews and surveys. And given all the interruptions that we've had with COVID, this project does have a year-long extension to it. So now we actually have 8 months for data collection, which is very nice. And with this additional time, hopefully we can dive more deeply and have a much longer time period to collect data, and we can make this data collection as efficient as possible. So with that, I'm going to pass it along to Mac, who's going to talk more about reclamation.
Everybody, my name is Mac. I'm a non-traditional junior at UM Western. I'm studying environmental sustainability with an emphasis in natural resource stewardship. If you're hiring, I'm looking. Today, in terms of our cruise project, I'm going to be talking about how our data will be used and why it's important. First, let me explain how this data is going to be used. We're going to share these results from the surveys and interviews and observations with policymakers, specifically the agencies that are developing plans for Warm Springs Ponds restoration and remediation. We're going to be setting up individual meetings with the EPA, the NRDP, the Clark Fork Coalition, and Fish and Wildlife Parks, but we're not going to we're not limiting ourselves to those 4 agencies. We are also going to share results with community stakeholders. We're planning on public meetings in communities. COVID's made everything kind of different. We have a lot of unknowns, but we're brainstorming how we can engage the public, how we can do these public meetings. Like Corey said, our grant was extended by a year, so we'll see how that goes. We also want to reach out through academic audience mediums, such as the Research Symposium here at UM Western. Talking about getting involved with the community, a paper written in 2018 by Denanton and Meadow, they quoted a paper by Castellanos et al., and they said, ultimately, created reports in lay language, a puppet play, used calendars to display key findings, and created radio messages to broadcast to key communities. I don't think we're going to do a puppet play. I'm not knocking a puppet play, but we want to reach out, through to our local stakeholders in a language that they're going to be able to understand. They also observed case studies in this paper that stress the importance of translating research into lay language in order to reach local stakeholders. They explained how little training is implemented to help academics in delivering research results to the public. I don't think we have an issue with that here at Western. We have a lot of classes that focuses on bridging the gap between science and public perception. With that being said, with this project, with Cruise Project, we want to have a wide spectrum of dissemination, including social media, local radio, newspapers, etc.
I think in the community around Warm Springs Ponds, local radio and local newspapers would be pretty effective. So we're kind of looking around and see what we're going to do to disseminate this data, this information. So now that you understand how our data will be used, let's talk about why it's important. It's critical to connect science to groups involved through collaborative research. This public engagement is important because also in that paper from Donanton and Meadow, they talked about how communication is more than a tool for just disseminating research results. It's shown to actually strengthen stakeholder engagement. Furthermore, that communication that communication should exist throughout the research process, not just at one point or at the end or just in the beginning, throughout the process. They said, quote, previous research has disentangled several principles that support greater collaboration between researchers and practitioners and contribute to the co-production of knowledge. Lemos and Morehouse in 2005 noted that successful co-production processes involve stakeholders in multiple stages of research, including definition of the problem, development of research question, research design, data collection, data analysis is where we're at right now, meaning making, testing results, and then dissemination of knowledge. It's everything that we're trying to focus on. The importance of collaborative research and remediation and restoration projects cannot be overstated. So we've talked about how our data will be used and its importance. And so I'd like to wrap up by leaving you with a challenge. Warm Springs Ponds doesn't have to stop at remediation. We can think forward in terms of restoration. Our cruise project is just a sliver of a puzzle that has no end pieces. Like we aren't boxed. We're not boxed in with this project. We can think outside of it. This is a potential for massive restoration opportunity. Alex Leone, a restoration specialist, from Clark Fork Coalition, gave us a presentation to our class last week, actually. And he talked about places in this system, in this drainage system, with 13 fish per mile. So if you're driving along I-90 at 60 miles per hour, I know it's slow, but you're doing that for 1 minute, and you can count a fish for 13 seconds, and then after that, it's a very silent drive. There's no fish in this area. It's less than ideal. So moving forward with restoration and remediation, instead of 13 fish per mile, think 1,300 fish per mile, or think 13,000 birds, or 13 million invertebrates. Think of countless opportunities for recreation, human uses, and also think of an unprecedented win for natural resource restoration. Thinking about all this, it's going to take all of us working together collaboratively. It's not just EPA, it's not just UN Western, it's not just, we have to do it together. So thinking about the future of the Warm Springs Ponds, we want to hear from you. We want to know, what do you have in mind for Warm Springs Ponds in its future? Dr. John Ray, a liberal studies professor from Montana Tech, he gave a lecture in February this year. He was talking about how man-made creations are imagined ideas of our surroundings and our environment, how things that we have built is because we have seen them before. He went on to say, quote, restoration and remediation are imaginative activities, and so hopefully as you study remediation, feel free to imagine. Thank you for your time. Thank you all for listening. We hope that you take our survey whenever it's available, and with that, we welcome any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, virtual applause, I'm sure, from the audience. Unfortunately, we can't hear that in person. But for question and answer, I mentioned this at the very beginning, but for those that joined perhaps just a little bit after noon, we're going to do our Q&A through the chat function on WebEx, just, again, to help that run efficiently and smoothly. So if you do have a question, please type that into the chat box, and then Arica and I will be able to see those as they come through. But yeah, thank you all so much for that presentation. It was wonderful. So, like I said, I wish we could be in person. I'm sure there'll be lots of applause for everything.
I'm seeing one of the chats right now, and yes, CTEC will be part of my structured interviews. I'm sorry that that didn't come up in the talk, but we've been using a lot of those resources to understand the system, to look at the work that's been done, and so all the work that CTEC has done has been really instrumental in our understanding of the Warm Spring Ponds and what's been done thus far and where we need to go. So you will be hearing from us, and thank you for the contact. Anybody else wants to share contacts, I'll take it. But yeah, my email's on here, so you can feel free to send me an email. Yeah, and share those so we know who to reach out to.
See, it looks like we have a question. David Hutchins.
Great question. That is a challenge, and especially I think with COVID, and we've had to kind of change some of our research methods and design as part of COVID and moving this online. So obviously, yeah, there's going to be a strong emphasis for those who have that technology and are comfortable answering surveys and questions online. We're hoping that between the interviews and also the participant observation, we're getting data points from kind of other areas as well to kind of create a more comprehensive picture. We're not going to be able to, again, just limits of this study between resources, time, design, and all that. We're not going to be able to get, and our goal isn't necessarily to get number of people, to get such a detailed level where we can know exactly who's doing what when at the ponds. But a big part of our goal is to get the breadth of perspectives that exist, so we can bring that breadth of perspectives to the table, and at least have a sense of, how are people using the ponds? What are kind of the areas that get the most use and things like that. It's definitely not going to be a complete picture, but we're really trying to, as much as we can, get the breadth of that picture. We do have the QR codes. If students want to add in things that you guys have in response to these questions, feel free. We do have the QR codes. Again, it's kind of tech savvy folks. We're also going to create, the plan is to create a website with an easy name. We're thinking wspsurvey.org or Warm Springs Pond Survey. So something that would be easy for people to remember, they could type in and find as another way. We are going to be reaching out to like the Anaconda Sportsman Group and have them disseminate the survey and things like that through their local networks. That's another way to kind of reach people who maybe we wouldn't be able to just reach online.
Awesome. It looks like we have a question from Ashley Gilbert that just came in.
So I'm not sure if I'm seeing. Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Yeah, it kind of varies. It definitely kind of varies. But right now, as we've kind of drafted the survey questions, and we've gotten some feedback from Alex, as we mentioned, at Clark Fork Coalition. We've got some feedback from Allie Archer at EPA. We still need to hear from Montana Fish Wildlife Parks. We still want to hear from NRDP. So there's a few more people we want to hear from. A challenge of working with so many stakeholders and trying to incorporate everyone's interest is that sometimes there can be different needs across these different groups. Or, one person wants to ask this question and someone else doesn't want us to ask that question, something like that. So we're working on those pieces right now and trying to combine all the feedback we're getting. And part of that is with each iteration of the survey, we have to resend it out and keep people in the loop. And we're really working to do a lot of transparency with this process, as we know that's another way to help build trust in the process. So those are pieces. The year extension, honestly, with COVID gives us a lot more. I think it's really going to help this research. It gives us a lot more time to collect that data, give us time for this backward exchange, which does take a lot of extra time, and especially because right now everyone's lives are so busy. So we need to build in that extra time for that.
Awesome. It looks like we have a question that came in from Ed about comparisons between cost and return.
I think dollar money questions is so important. The economic side is obviously so important with all these projects. That is outside the scope of our study, but I think it would be great for someone to be looking at that. And that's a great question. And I think that's definitely something for looking at kind of next steps as we think about where do we go after this project's done. The economic side is super important. So thanks for bringing that up.
Let's see. Oh, we have a question from Colleen Moore about fish within the greater food chain.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern, and I do not have the latest. I'm not the person to ask, but I can look into that and get back to you. I believe the EPA has a lot of this information. I know Fish, Wildlife, and Parks also I think has a lot of this information. That said, yeah, I don't know how detailed that information is and how much we actually know about how much is passed on, how much, of the migratory birds, are they there every year? Are they, is it the same populations? I don't know if we have that level of data. I'm on the social science side, but it's definitely an important question. And that's part of we're trying to understand are how people are using these ponds, and yeah, are they, if they're hunting there, and eating the animals, what are those pieces? I'm seeing one of the students, I think, has a comment or something to respond to. Mac, do you want to come in? We'll switch.
Hi, this is a great question talking about, is there evidence about health of wildlife from fish consumption? This is a question that we had this whole process where we aren't sure, but there has to be, right? I mean, but we don't know. I don't know. We talked to somebody from Fish and Wildlife Parks while we were out there. I didn't really get a great answer on that, but these are the kinds of questions that we have as well. These are the kinds of answers that we are also seeking for this. So thank you for that question. It's a good question.
We have another, comment just noting that it's 300,000 migratory birds who visit the site each year. So it's pretty incredible. And again, I think there's, a lot of other people who've looked at some of these pieces. That it's an area that I need to do my homework on, but hopefully we can get you some information and get back to you.
Awesome. Well, do we have any more questions coming through the chat? I guess, Arica has her email right there if you want to contact her and the students directly about this study and this research. But otherwise, not seeing anything else coming through the chat. So just a final thank you so much to everyone that presented today. This was a wonderful presentation, and thank you to everyone that joined us virtually, trying out this new format and seeing how it works. And we recorded this presentation as well, so it'll be available on our website, on the IOE's website, and you can, share that link with anyone. Contact me directly, madison.boone@montana.edu. But let's see, we've got a couple. Another comment from Dave Griffiths that came through the chat as well.
So so a question is, are people concerned about the health of wildlife from the contamination? And that's definitely going to be in our surveys, trying to understand, the perceptions around the contamination. And some, people have different risk tolerances too. And so, are people, part of the participant observations, people aren't supposed to be eating the fish and taking the fish home, but are they? So, that's something that we can get out of the participant observations that we might not come up in the surveys. But I think asking those questions is exactly what we're trying to do, is understand the perceptions of contamination and what are the health effects and how well do people understand these pieces. Thank you, Dave Griffiths. And did you have another comment?
Yeah, I want to touch on that.
Come on over. Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on, are people concerned about the health of wildlife from the contamination? As far as we know, they are, because whenever a fish kill happens, people in the community get worried, like what's going on, what's going to happen to our water? Is there something wrong with our water? Why are the fish dying? I think it's a great question, and I think it's easily answered. People are concerned whenever a fish kill happens, for sure. Thank you for the question.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and wrap up then. Thank you again to everyone for joining us. So I'm going to go ahead and Thank you.
It took all of us to produce it. Not everyone presented, but it took us all to make it happen.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you.
Okay.